Welcome to Raising the Bar, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on the country's most successful leaders and how they elevate their business and their teams. Please welcome our host, Alison DePauli.
So welcome, everybody. It is my pleasure to have Steve Watson, a great friend of mine, a CFO, CHRO of a mid-sized private employer, and also the CEO of Trend Breakers. And his biggest goal right now is to help 1,000 employers contain their healthcare costs. Now, I know that you all know that is a cause near and dear to my heart. I have a goal not too different from that. But today we're going to talk about how Steve identified the problem and any problem and what he did to identify the real problem, not just the symptom of the problem, as well as identify the solutions and then how he went ahead and implemented solutions. And I think you'll be surprised at where this conversation goes. So Steve, welcome.
Oh, excited to be here. It's fun to I've had you on my show multiple times. You are one of my favorite people as well. So I love having you, hearing from you. And now I get to return the favor here. So.
Well, I'm very glad to hear you here. And we are insurance nerds, so we got to be careful not to
talk exactly
all the time. But I want to go back. You arrived at your new goal, how to help 1,000 employers get control of their healthcare costs because you had a problem. Yep. How did you identify what the actual problem was and not what the symptoms of the problem are?
Well, I think just starting out with the symptoms, because if you're listening to this, you're CEO, CFO, HR professional, you've been there during renewal time. And so I was a new CFO of a company with about 500 employees in the state of Arizona. It got to renewal season. I hadn't talked to my broker most of the year. And then he shows up and says, "Oh, I don't have very good news for you." I'm like, "That's not good." He said, "Well, unfortunately, you had an employee that had a very large claim. Nobody else wants to give a quote for you. And the only thing we can get to you is a 30% rate increase." And my jaw almost hit the floor because the CFO side of me is sitting there 30%. That's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that now as a CFO, I'm having to figure out how to pay for. Yep. And then I actually had the HR hat I was wearing as well. So now the HR side of me is how am I going to stand up in front of hundreds of employees and tell them that their insurance rates are going up? We're going to have to water down the benefits just to kind of make do. And it just ticked me off. I'm like, how in the world does this happen? Because as a CFO, I know how to manage all aspects of the business, but just didn't understand benefits at all. How can you get a 30% rate increase and not know about it? And the crazy thing is when I started to dig into it, the employee didn't even work for us anymore. It wasn't even there. And I'm looking at a future increase, a future proposal. And they're and I'm the person doesn't even work here anymore. How do you give me a 30% rate increase for some, the risk isn't the same. So that's what started it. That was the original symptom. I think that's what sparks most of people sitting in my seat to actually start looking at this is when they get that 5% increase, that 10% increase, that, those benefits that keep getting watered down. They keep switching carriers every year and just ticks you off. Now, the real problem with that solution, that's this whole conversation, right?
How I think you touched on something very important there, and I think it's something that most employers don't realize. A lot of employers get a large rate increase for a claimant that is no longer on their plan for whatever reason, and the insurance company says, "Well, we spent all this money." Well, I have an answer to that. What's yours?
Of why that happens?
Of why they give you that, "Well, we spent all this money" answer.
Yeah, to me, they're always looking. Well, there's lots of answers of they're just. Well, I'll stay nice here. I'll stay nice. I think the way that they run their business, they're always looking backwards. They're always looking at last year's claims, last year's stuff, and trying to make their money back up again. And people think of the normal plans, well, I have insurance, so I'm not going to have to pay for this. Oh, you'll pay for it. You'll pay for you may not pay for it this year, but you'll pay for it in year 2, year 3, year 4 until they make up their money plus some cushion back there. Yep. So the timing matters a lot.
Yes. And I think one thing that many advisors don't do is push those claims out of the calculations, because what people don't realize, I found, is that self-insurance contracts are the same as fully insured contracts, right? There's reinsurance. The insurance company didn't actually pay all that money. So why should you?
Yeah, and that took me a long time to figure that out, because it's crazy, again, sitting at my table, when there's a bad claims year for my employees, everybody's talking about it. Brokers talking about it, the carriers talking about it. You had this big claim, all this stuff. That's why your rates are going up. But the funny thing is that the next year, when there's no big claims, they're all crickets. And then they're all talking about national stuff. Well, trends up, hospital systems are up, like everything's up. Like there's never a good year. Like there's never you just did really well and stuff like that.
Our mutual friend, Lester Morales, he says this often, which is your premium is their revenue.
It is.
And when you look at it like that, there's no reason to shrink your premium. And
nobody wants to make less money.
Exactly. Nobody wants to make less money. When you looked at this problem as a whole, where did you start?
I had to look in the mirror. I mean, really, I have all these trainings. I have my certification, CPA, SHRM certification, all this stuff. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea how this worked. There's nobody really held accountable within my organization. And so it really started with me learning. And so, reading different books that are out there, even like looking for books that are out there in different groups. Health Rosetta was good at the beginning, like reading some of the books and finding stuff out there that I didn't realize. Talking to my peers, like interviewing other CFOs and HR professionals, see what they're doing really helped. So that was my first step. And then the second one was the broker that I worked with, because going back to that 30% rate increase, it didn't take me long to figure out that while I was getting hurt a lot, they were getting a 30% raise. And that just did not feel well with me, that I'm asking this person to help me get the best rates, but I'm actually penalizing them when they do their job, when they do that, because their commission was tied. When it went up, they got paid more money. When it went down, they got paid less money. Not a lot of us work harder to get paid less. And so that was kind of like the second phase of like aligning those incentives and getting the broker stuff with me. And I could go off for hours and hours about that relationship there. But I think that a lot of people don't look at that relationship the way they should. So.
Do you think that too many employers look at the healthcare budget as a commodity and not as something that can be managed?
100%. Even the way that we budget in finance, they're usually just wrapped under EREs, is the term we use, employee related expenses. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when we budget, we'll say, well, it's 20% or 25%. That's just like, it's just like normal. It's like, it is what it is. And there's nothing you can really do about it. It's just kind of built into our society. The insurance always goes up. There's not really anything you can do about it. And it gets kind of hard. Like, can I even mess with that area as well? You get an HR and they talk about HIPAA and all these other things. And so there's all these kind of like flags that sometimes you're like, well, I don't want to touch that area. And then you start realizing, and what got me over the hump really was not so much, the theoretical or salespeople talking about it, was hearing peer after peer after peer doing something about it. Like, this employer did something, that employer did something, that employer did somebody in my industry did something. I was like, well, if they're all doing something, maybe I'm the one missing out on it.
Yes, I hear that also. How did you handle the change with both your HR team, because HR has a lot of responsibilities and they, bear the brunt of a lot of things that they really don't have any control over, as well as the larger organization? That I found that is something that works,
it's hard.
That's been done over a few years.
Yeah. Yes. And it took me 2 years. From that time when I got that big increase to figuring out the next step. And a lot of that honestly was just me getting comfortable with it, because it's one thing for me to sign up for something that just impacts just me. It's another thing to like sign up for something that impacts every single employee and their spouses and their dependents, and is a super huge line item. And so it takes a lot of people approving that. And it's not only for me to get convinced, but then helping me have the knowledge of how to help other people to like, no, this is a good thing. And so what was always been important to me is to do everything that I can that doesn't impact employees. And it's surprising the amount of things, like small things you can do on the back end, that for the employees, they don't know the difference. You can move from, I'll use the carrier's term, like level funding to partially self-funding within a carrier setup that the employees have. They still have their card, they still have their PPO plan, they still have their HSA plan, all the same doctors, all the same stuff. It's all the stuff on the back end. So that's where I started. Like, let me just pick the area in finance, how I pay for it, how I finance those things, make those changes. and got some huge wins right there. And then all of a sudden people start looking at it like, wow, well, you got that huge win. What else can you do?
Yes, I found that too. And I also find that employers are often quite surprised at the quantity of things that they can do.
Yes.
You can change almost everything about your plan without people realizing what you've done.
Yeah. And I think what's hard is that a lot of, just think again back to that 30% rate increase. What's been set up right now is finance and HR against each other. So we get that 30% rate increase, and finance is like, I don't have $300,000. We're going to have to like water down the benefits. And then HR is like, I got to defend my employees. I got to better recruit and retain employees. And so there's like this fight between the two of them. And from HR standpoint, when they hear lower cost, they're automatically thinking lower,
quality,
higher deductibles, smaller network. I'm doing something to impact that plan. And they don't realize that you can actually get the same thing for lower cost.
Yes. And predictable cost.
And predictable. And that was hard for me to like realize that. So it took a little while to figure it out. It took me talking to other people, but it is very possible. And yeah, just small tweaks that you can make. And that's why I started Trend Breakers, was just this idea of like getting all this information out there. It's why I'm doing the Employee Benefits Academy. Like there's a lot of things that you can do out there that are just small tweaks that don't impact employees, that can save a lot of money. And that's what I love sharing with people.
Let's talk for a little bit about the Employee Benefits Academy, because I think that can be so valuable for employers. Where did you get the genesis for that? What was the genesis for that?
So again, I had my CFO job at my company, and then there was a broker in town. I'd always had a CFO consulting company on the side, and there was a broker in town that needed a CFO, an interim CFO. And so I became that CFO on the side. And so I got to see all the back end side of running a brokerage agency, where all the money came from, all the incentives, all the different things. And I just thought, I in that moment, I was like, if employers knew all the stuff that was going on behind the scenes, if they really knew that, they would make better decisions. But there really wasn't anything out there. There was no course for HR people just getting in this, learn about benefits. There was nothing from finance. There was nothing from peers that I could find. And so that was the beginning of Trend Breakers. And just, even like this past year, I saw this thing that Starbucks spends more money on employee benefits than they do on coffee beans.
Yep. For a long time.
And that was from like 2005, I think, is when that quote came out. But I'm like, it just hit me across the head of like, how many resources does Starbucks put into sourcing coffee beans? Like, how many years are they ahead doing it? Have people just under procurement for just coffee beans. And I don't know anything about Starbucks, but my guess is they don't put that same amount of resources into employee benefits. And so I just thought about, how do we invest into those things within our company? Most companies, they probably spend more on employee benefits than all of their IT department combined.
Yep.
Or more than, maybe their raw materials, or more than these kind of things. And so I wanted to build an academy where we're teaching employers, empowering employers, CFOs, finance people, so they come out of this and they know the tweaks they can make. They can feel empowered in those seats. And so that's why I'm starting up in August, and super excited about it. And
I'm super excited for that too. I think that employers need a resource that is not an industry resource.
Yeah. So I'm not a broker. I'm not a carrier. I don't care who you work with. I definitely have my preferences, but that's not what this is. This is about teaching you how to go through those renewals. And it's crazy. Last year, I'll just give you a quick example. I was working with a company. They got their renewal in August. So this is COVID, in the middle of COVID, August of 2020, they got a 2% rate increase, and they were ready to sign on the dotted line. There was like 2%, whatever, I'm going. I'm like, just stop. Just hold up. Just hold on a second. And they were spending about $6 million in premiums every year. I said, well, what are your claims? Like, well, we don't know what our claims were. I'm like, well, that's the first problem. Like, you need to know what your claims were. Yep. And so they went back and asked their broker and asked the carrier. It came back, they had $3.4 million worth of claims. And my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, let me do the quick math there. Okay, so you gave the insurance carrier $6 million. The insurance carrier paid the hospitals and all the doctors $3.4 million. They kept $2.6 million of your money. Some of it's admin, whatever, but $2.6 million of your money. And they had the audacity to give you a 2% increase. I'm like, screw that. So that got them all fired up about it. And so they went back, they pushed back, and they ended up getting a $400,000 decrease, which to me was just scratching the surface of it. But still, $400,000 they were able to reinvest back into the 401k plans. They didn't change the carrier, didn't change anything for their employees. Yep. But I love that example, because at the beginning, they didn't know the questions they asked. They didn't know how to do anything. And so by partnering with other employers and knowing those things, you become empowered. It's almost like that friend you take with you to buy a car when you don't really know it. Like, it just helps you do that process.
What was the response of the employer when they got the claims? Did they even, I mean, because most people don't understand how that works, right? Because they've never seen that before.
My jaw dropped, theirs didn't. Like, they were like, huh, or whatever, but they didn't realize like how bad that was. Because again, sometimes we deal with workers' compensation that you can spend $100,000 in premium and have $10,000 worth of claims. They think it's like really bad. And you're like, well, that's the loss ratio, like 10%. That's crazy. But
Exactly.
To me, anything under, 80, 85%, you should be pushing back on them. So, I mean, anything for that.
I agree.
That case, anything under $5 million worth of claims, to have audacity to give you an increase. I mean, you got to know when to push back, and it's knowing those claims is the very, very basic thing that all employers should know their claims.
I agree. And what I really love about that is that they took that $400,000 and they reinvested it back into their people.
Oh, and I find that, I have these two different podcasts with CFOs and HR professionals. Most people, I mean, we're all employees as well. Like, we want good benefits. We want different things there. There are times that the company takes a little bit of money to offset, prior year increases and stuff. And most of the time they increase benefits, they increase wages, they give those bonuses that they haven't done. And so that's what I love about, insurance carriers have enough of our money. Like, let's take some of that money back, about $2.6 million, and put it back into our companies, our employees.
Yes. I had an employee and a CEO tell me not too long ago that for the first time, they gave merit increases and did not turn around and take it back.
Take it all out for benefits. Yeah.
And that people noticed and commented.
Yeah.
And that they were appreciative of that. And there was a boost in morale because of it. And they were small merit increases. They were, a couple percent, but people know.
Well, how about an open enrollment meeting where people are smiling?
Yeah.
I mean, I've canceled. We haven't done an open enrollment meeting in like 4 years because there was nothing really to say. Like, our benefits stay all the same or they get better. I mean, there was no selling to say like why these are still good benefits, or having to switch all the carriers and all the stuff there because we're trying to save money and do stuff. But I really like making HR the hero of open enrollment. Like, people are coming up to them and thanking them for all the work they're doing and for the benefits that they're getting. And you really, really can do this stuff if you're willing to just step back and just, start learning a little bit and getting the right partners in place and trying a little bit. I mean, and it's not theoretical. I mean, what I'm talking about is what I did. I mean, this is not like some book or something like that. This is exactly what I did and what I like helping others people replicate.
Talk a little bit about the conversations that you ask people to have with stakeholders, because I think there are real conversations to be had.
Like stakeholders, like within the company, or stakeholders in like here?
Within the company, because I think it isn't a one-party decision. This is
I mean, and let's be honest. Nobody wants a plan just built by finance because it'll be like this bare bones kind of thing. But nobody wants a plan just built by HR because of every bell and whistle in it. But the cost will be out of control. Like, it's got to have both. Like, we've got to be able to recruit and retain employees. That relationship matters a lot between HR and finance, and they have different priorities. Like, they got to be able to you got to be able to get both sides on board. What I find is that you'll get one side on board, and then they'll take their benefits and what they see as a win, and they'll try and sell those same wins to the other side. And it just doesn't work.
Nope.
If finance is like, man, we were able to save a bunch of money. We're so excited about, getting more value out of this stuff. And they go to HR, and HR is like, no, that's not what I'm really thinking about. Like, and I'm thinking about like risk and carriers and all this kind of stuff. And, people in HR are like, I got this amazing rep. They're working with me all the time. We have these benefits for them, and they're trying to give that to finance, and finance is just looking at the numbers, or they're not even presenting numbers. And like, I don't even know what you're saying. And
yes, I have found that change in the health insurance arena works best when the CFO and the head of HR, if that is the VP of HR, the SVP, the general counsel, the director, whatever it is, when they work together and they can have good, frank conversations about what they each need, because their goals are different, right? One is to recruit and retain, and the other is to drive revenue, profit.
Yeah, my recommendation at the beginning of the academy, that's the very first thing that we talk on is like, so if you're an HR, you're attending this academy, your very first homework assignment is to go to your CFO and ask them, what do they want? What are their priorities for this next year? Just ask them, like, what are your priorities for this next year? And what are your priorities for the benefits? And you'll just be surprised. And then the only way you're going to make changes is like, you got to be able to get your priorities and their priorities over the finish line.
What is the next thing that you tell them?
The next thing after that is, help them do the math of trying to figure out, how much you can save there. And we go into the big why of like, why is this important to even like work on this? Why? Because life's busy, especially in HR and finance. We have all these other things. And so we think about just the personal gains that you can have. Just for me, it was just nice to be able to like, wow, you're in finance and you brought $500,000 to the company. I mean, wow, like that's new, like revenue, new profit, stuff like that. So it just helped me and my profession step to the next level. So professionally, it's helped. Just think about your employees. You're the one sitting at the negotiating table for them on their behalf. And so to be able to get them better benefits at a better cost and all those different things, I think about that money. And then the third one is for your company. Again, $500,000. What are you going to do for your company? I mean, think about your CEO that's out there trying to get funding for your company for some new project or for some new thing, or new staffing within your department. So there's 3 big wins there that we're trying to do. And people resonate with different things. Like some do it personally, some do it because they're trying to help their employees, some do it because of the company. It doesn't matter as long as you know that this is important and you should be doing it.
Yes. I think that, I don't care if you're a for-profit or a nonprofit organization, you still need revenue to operate. And when you can come to the table and say, well, we can take $500,000 out of this budget, or if you're a little bit smaller employer, 25 or 50 or 100 or $200,000 out of this budget and make it better, then you are delivering real value to your organization, and that is almost always recognized.
Yeah, and we do this everywhere that we shop. I mean, I'm not a clinician. I don't know what care people need. I'm not telling what care, stuff like that. I'm saying, you tell me exactly what you need. It's like, I want a blue Tacoma this year, whatever. I'm going to go find you the best price for that blue Tacoma, whatever. Like that's where I get very, very focused on. And there's so many opportunities out there. I mean, one of the stories I tell people is I had allergies in my eyes. I went over to the pharmacist, and the pharmacist is like, well, it's super expensive. And I'm like, that's not a good sign. So I whip out my big insurance card, bam, it was like $235 first. I said, well, insurance is $231. I'm like, $4? You've saved me $4? I'm ready to walk out of there. And I, pull up this app on my phone. I could find it at a better price. It was like $75 there. And if I drove to Safeway, it was like 3 miles away, it was $20. And so again, I'm getting the exact same prescription at a much lower cost. And that was one transaction. So I love using that example because there are so many ways to get the exact same thing that you're doing, but at a much lower cost. And you can take those savings and reinvest it back into whatever you want to invest it in.
Exactly. And I think that consumers are becoming savvier every day. Yeah. We do a lot of, we are in the health insurance advising space, and we work pretty, intimately with some of our employees because they've got something going on and we're helping negotiate and walk through a strategy. And we've found that it works better when we're a little bit more involved. And I notice every year and almost every month that employees are getting savvier, and that employers who want to contain their budgets and do the right thing are having different conversations with their employees. Do you know they're having more frank conversations about, look, we're not trying to harm you. We're trying to help you. We want to do the right thing and make sure you have the right resources to get what you need. And this is how we're going to do it. Are you noticing that as well?
Not as much as I want to, right? I think that we can do a lot better job at it. I'm noticing that more of my peers are getting more involved with it. I still think that we need to have more conversations within HR and finance about it, but it seems like it's starting to like turn a corner a little bit. I mean, people ask me why I'm so passionate about it because I still am a CFO of a company. I still have my day job. I'm still doing this.
I know you do.
Why are you out there trying to help 1,000 employees or 1,000 employers? And it goes back to that thing of like, I just know too much now. It's like, I know how to save money. I know where people are getting screwed about it. So it's like, if I don't help them, I feel like I'm complicit with this messed up system now. It's like knowing how to save money on an airplane ticket and not helping that person know which site to go to or where to buy the exact same ticket.
Yep. So at Raise the Bar, we are pretty much about problem solving. Tell me the 3 steps that you use to solve any problem, not just this gnarly health insurance problem.
Like for me, it's like recognizing it's a problem. I think that's one of the biggest things we have within this field is like even knowing that there is an issue there, knowing that there's a different thing. So it's like understanding there's a problem. I'm a data junkie, a finance person and doing stuff. And so I dive into it and I do tons of scenarios of like what's worst case, what's best case, what's different things, like what's year 1, year 2, year 3, doing that helps me to see how things play out there. And then I think just having HR and finance hats has made me a better communicator and a better person there of like trying to understand other people and where they're coming from can help solve a lot of problems. Because again, if I just go in there with my finance hat and we're just going to do this, a lot of times I'm not going to get approval on it. But if I take some time beforehand and ask them what their priorities are and what they're trying to solve, and then I use what I'm trying to solve to help them, that's how I get through things. So
I agree wholeheartedly. I found that as much as I have the patience of a flea, that when I take the time to build the case, that it does happen much more effectively. And I also think that you do such a good job of taking people where they are and helping them move forward. And that also makes change a little bit easier, I think.
Yeah, again, you think about that Starbucks scenario, like you don't have to do everything right now. Like just take a step.
Yep.
Right? Employee benefits, just take one step. But it's like even knowing what that step is. I think a lot of people don't realize that they can just take one little baby step this year and another one next year, and they're going to save a ton of money, but just take a step.
Yep. One step at a time. If it's all right with you, we're going to put a note to the Employee Benefits Academy, a link to the Employee Benefits Academy in our show notes for when this episode goes live. And we'll let people know where they can find you, because I think you can be so incredibly beneficial for so many people.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Just trend breakers everywhere, right? And just search for that and you'll find me.
Trend breakers everywhere. Any parting words?
No, I love what you're doing. I love how you're problem solving and getting people out there, because there's some amazing people out there solving huge things, right? We all have our genius zones, and whether solving recruiting problems or solving technology problems or different things, I think just recognizing that there's people that have already solved this healthcare stuff. Like it's been solved. Like this is not theoretical and people are doing it. And so just being willing to go out there and interview people and talk to other people and see what they're doing will open up your eyes. That helped me open up my eyes. So that's what I'd recommend people do.
We will pass that on. Thank you for listening to Raise the Bar. And Steve, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Again soon.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Raising the Bar is powered by Altiqe Consulting, the country's leading independent expert in healthcare cost containment. Astute employers know there's a better way to offer health insurance, and we help them achieve it.